I pulled into my sister-in-law's driveway 3 days earlier than anyone expected for Labor Day weekend, and the first thing that hit me wasn't the heat. It was the sound. Savannah in late summer has this constant electric whine, cicadas screaming like the trees are boiling from the inside, and it wrapped around my car the moment I killed the engine. I sat there for a second with both hands on the steering wheel, feeling that small, stupid pride you feel when you're about to surprise someone you still believe is on your team. My name is Ethan Park. I was 41 that summer, the kind of man who paid bills on time, kept an emergency charger in the glove box, and thought stability meant something. My wife, Callie, was 35, bright, beautiful, magnetic, the kind of person who could walk into a room and make strangers feel like they'd been friends for years. We'd been together 12 years, married for 9, and if you'd asked me that morning what loyalty looked like, I would have told you it looked like driving 4 hours with a bag of pralines on the passenger seat because you remembered her mom liked them. Collie's family treated Labor Day like a competitive sport. Low country boil, bourbon slushes, matching shirts, pictures on the porch, the whole performance. Her mother, Wren Holloway, ran it like a production. Perfect hair, perfect hostess smile, perfect ability to make you feel like you were always one wrong move away from disappointing her. Her stepfather, Dale, was the quiet type who grilled, nodded, and tried not to get caught in the crossfire. I wasn't supposed to arrive until Sunday night. Callie had teased me all week about being responsible and finishing my project before coming down, but the project ended early. A miracle. A rare little gift. So I decided I'd show up Friday, wrap my arms around my wife from behind while she was slicing lemons, and steal a private moment before the chaos of her family swallowed the weekend whole. The Holloway house looked like it had never heard the word budget. White paint, wide porch, potted ferns big enough to hide secrets. I parked on the street because Wren hated tire marks on her driveway, grabbed the pralines, and walked around back toward the kitchen entrance like I always did. I could smell something sweet and smoky in the air, and for a second I felt relaxed, like maybe this weekend would actually be what Callie kept claiming it was, a reset. Then I heard her laugh. Not the laugh she gave me when I brought home flowers, not the laugh that bubbled out during dumb reality TV. This one was lighter, sharper, like she wasn't carrying anything at all. The back door was open, but the screen door was shut, warped at the edges, the mesh ripped near the bottom. I slowed without meaning to, half hidden by a fern because I didn't want to barge in like an idiot and ruin whatever conversation she was having. I was still deciding whether to knock when I heard my name, clear as a bell. Ethan still thinks this weekend is about reconnecting, Callie said, and her voice had that soft, amused cruelty people use when they don't think you're a real person. He's so predictable. Wren answered like she'd been holding that line in her mouth all week. Predictable is fine in a dishwasher, honey, not in a husband. I stood there, praline suddenly heavy in my hand, waiting for the moment someone would say, "Oh, don't be mean." But no one did. Callie made a little sound that might have been a laugh, might have been a shrug. "I'm late," she said. Like really late. There was a beat of silence, and then Wren's voice turned delighted, conspiratorial. "Oh my God, you're serious?" "I took 2 tests," Callie said. "It's Damon's." My throat tightened so fast it felt physical. Damon Ricks, Callie's boss, 40-something, real estate developer, the kind of man whose watch cost more than my first car. I'd met him once at a company holiday party, and he'd shaken my hand like he was scanning a receipt. Wren's tone went syrupy. "Damon is exactly what you deserve." Callie laughed again. "He's already talking about a condo on Tybee. He says he can take care of me in a way Ethan never could." I waited for the part where she said she felt guilty. I waited for the part where she admitted she was confused. But the next sentence didn't sound like a confession. It sounded like a schedule. "I'll tell Ethan after the weekend," she said. "Once your friends get here and the pictures are posted, I'll have my perfect family holiday content. Then I'll file. Damon's attorney has a plan. I'll keep the house in Atlanta. Ethan won't fight. He never fights." Wren made a satisfied little hum. "And if he does?" Callie's voice dropped, calm like she was picking a side dish. "Then we make it messy. Damon said he can get someone to say Ethan has anger issues. Like, unpredictable. enough to scare him into a settlement. Something inside me went cold, even in that Georgia heat. They weren't just leaving me. They were planning to rewrite me. And standing there behind a ripped screen door, I realized I had two choices: walk in and shatter, or walk away and start thinking. I didn't move for a full 5 seconds after she said it. Anger issues. Unpredictable. Like my entire personality could be reduced to a rumor Damon could buy, and Ren could serve up at the right time with iced tea and a pitying smile. My body wanted to do the obvious thing. Kick the screen door open, demand answers, make them look me in the eye and explain how 9 years of marriage turned into a strategy meeting. But the part of me that had survived corporate deadlines and mortgage stress and the slow grind of adulthood did something else. It made a decision. Not dramatic, not heroic, just clean. I stepped backward, careful, quiet, like the ground might crack if I moved too fast. The pralines felt ridiculous in my hand now, like a peace offering to a war I didn't know I was already fighting. I got to my car, shut the door, and sat there with the air conditioning blowing cold on my face while my heart tried to punch its way out of my ribs. Inside that house, my wife was laughing. Outside, I was learning what it felt like to become a stranger in my own life. People always say betrayal shatters you, like glass. For me, it was more like a switch flipped, and everything got sharp. Little details started lining up in my head like they'd been waiting for permission. Callie, working late, but not bringing home her laptop, the new perfume that wasn't her old brand. The way she'd started showering the moment she got home, like the day itself, was something she needed to scrub off. And then that sentence about moving money before Tuesday. Said so casually, like she was reminding someone to pick up ice. I drove away without turning into the driveway, without giving myself the chance to do something emotional and irreversible. 2 miles down the road, I pulled into a gas station, parked under a sun-faded awning, and stared at the numbers on the pump like they were instructions. My hands were shaking, not because I wanted to cry, but because I couldn't decide whether I was more furious or humiliated. I knew one thing: if they were already planning to paint me as unstable, then acting unstable would be the dumbest gift I could hand them. So I made calls. The first was to Naomi Chen, a family lawyer I'd met through work, the kind of woman who spoke like she'd already read the ending and didn't feel like wasting time on the middle. She picked up on the second ring, and the moment I told her what I'd heard, her voice went from casual to surgical. She didn't ask how I felt. She asked what I had. Proof, documentation, dates, accounts. When I told her I'd overheard everything through a screen door, she paused just long enough to make me feel the weight of that. Then she said, "Okay, then you don't confront anyone. You don't text accusations. You don't go back into that house. If they're talking about making you look volatile, every word you say to her becomes potential evidence against you. You stay calm. You stay boring. You stay smart." She told me to sleep somewhere else and send her my basic financial information as soon as I could. First thing Tuesday morning, she said, "We file. Not because it's petty, because it's protection." The second call was to my cousin Jay. He wasn't a detective, not a hacker, not some movie-style fixer. He was worse than that, in the best way. A forensic accountant. The kind of man who could look at a bank statement and tell you what people were trying to hide from themselves. He listened without interrupting, and when I got to the part about money being moved, his tone turned hard. "Forward me the last 6 months," he said. "Joint accounts, credit cards, anything with your name on it. If they're planning a financial play, you need to know the shape of it before you're standing in court pretending you're not drowning." The third call was to Callie, and I hated myself a little for how easily the lie came out. She answered bright, cheerful, like her mouth hadn't just formed my death sentence 10 minutes earlier. "Babe," she said, "you're not coming until Sunday." I told her my project got delayed, that I was still in Atlanta, that I might not make it down until late. There was a pause, tiny, almost invisible, but relief slipped through it anyway. "That's okay," she said. "Sweet as syrup. We'll miss you. Drive safe." When the call ended, I sat there in my car and realized something that made my skin crawl. She could sound loving while actively planning to ruin me. I checked into a bland hotel off I-95 that night, the kind of place with beige walls and a lobby that smelled like lemon cleaner trying to cover old smoke. I slept in scraps, waking up every hour with the same thought. They weren't just leaving. They were building a story where I was the villain. By morning, Jay and I met at a cafe in Atlanta. He opened his laptop like a man about to perform an autopsy. "Okay," he said, scanning the first statements I'd sent. "You're not imagining it. There are withdrawals labeled maintenance, small enough to dodge attention, consistent enough to be intentional." He tapped the screen and looked up at me. "Someone's been siphoning quietly. Maybe Ren, maybe someone working for her. But Ethan," he paused, and something in his eyes told me the weekend hadn't just changed my marriage. "This isn't only personal," he said. "This is premeditated. And if we're going to keep you clean in this, we need to move faster than they do." Jay didn't do drama, which made his conclusions feel heavier. He slid his laptop toward me and scrolled with 2 fingers, calm as a surgeon. The maintenance payments popped up like a heartbeat. Regular, modest, just under the line that would make someone panic. "This is how people steal when they don't want to be noticed," he said. "Not once, not big, consistent." My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. I kept thinking about Callie's voice through that screen door. "Don't forget to move the money before Tuesday," as if she was reminding someone to thaw shrimp. Jay clicked into another tab and pulled up public filings on Damon's company, Rick's Coastal Development. Permits, liens, lawsuits, paperwork most people ignore because it's boring. But boredom is where the truth hides. "Look at the pattern," he said, pointing at a list of subcontractor complaints and payment disputes. "This isn't a clean operation. This is a guy who keeps skating the edge and assuming nobody checks." I stared at the screen and felt something ugly settle behind my ribs. Callie hadn't just cheated. She'd tied herself, and potentially me, to a man with a mess brewing under his polished smile. On the drive back to my hotel, Jay said the next sentence like it was obvious. "You need to talk to Damon's wife." I actually laughed, short and bitter. "Damon doesn't have a wife," I said. "He has a brand." Jay didn't even blink. "He has a wife," he replied, "and she's the person most likely to already have pieces of this puzzle." An hour later, I was sitting on the edge of a stiff hotel bed with my phone in my hand, staring at the number Jay had found. When she answered, her voice was controlled, polite, distant, trained. "Hello?" I swallowed. "My name is Ethan Park," I said. "I'm married to Callie Holloway." Silence stretched. Then she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. "I know who she is," she said. I told her what I'd overheard, the pregnancy, the plan, the money. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't plead. I just delivered facts. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her calm had hairline fractures in it. "If she's pregnant," she said, more to herself than to me, "then he's gotten reckless." She asked where I was, what I had, what I could prove. I told her the truth. No photos yet, but financial patterns and a timeline that matched. "Good," she said finally. "Then we do this clean. No shouting, no posts, no games, just evidence." I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear that until my shoulders dropped on their own. "Clean," I repeated. "That's all I want." By Tuesday morning, Naomi filed before Callie could move another dollar or build a story around my name. By Tuesday afternoon, the papers weren't delivered to my front door like some private tragedy. Naomi arranged service at a ribbon-cutting event in Savannah, where Callie and Damon were smiling for cameras as if they were already the future. When my phone started lighting up with her calls, one after another frantic, I didn't answer. Naomi sent one message on my behalf, and that was it. All future communication through counsel. That night, Serena called me back, voice low and tight. "They served a search warrant at Damon's office today," she said. My stomach dropped. "For what?" I asked. "City procurement," she replied. "Kickbacks, bidding. Whatever he's been hiding, it's not hidden anymore." I stared out the hotel window at the parking lot lights buzzing in the dark and understood the worst part. Callie hadn't been planning a new life. She'd been running toward a collapsing building, and she'd been ready to drag me into the rubble so she could land softer. The fallout didn't explode all at once like people imagine. It moved the way rot moves, quiet, steady, unavoidable. Serena and I didn't talk every day, but when we did, it was always the same tone, clipped, factual, like we were both afraid emotion would turn this into a circus and somehow make Damon and Callie the victims. Naomi handled my side like a fence going up fast around a property line, freezing what could be frozen, documenting what needed documenting, putting everything in writing so there was no room for Callie to claim I agreed to anything in a hallway conversation. Jay kept digging and sending me short messages that felt like punches. Another maintenance payment. Another transfer with a rounded number that looked like someone trying to make theft look like routine. Every time my phone buzzed, a part of me still expected it to be Callie calling to confess, to apologize, to beg. Instead, it was proof that she'd been planning this longer than I wanted to admit. Wren's world started cracking in a different direction. Damon's warrant made noise in the business circles, but Wren's power didn't live there. Hers lived in boardrooms with floral tablecloths and community partners, and women who said words like integrity while counting other people's donations. Serena didn't go nuclear. She went precise. She forwarded documented discrepancies tied to Wren's beloved fundraiser accounts to the nonprofit treasurer and quietly asked one question: "Can you explain these?" That was it. No accusations. No threats. Just a paper trail handed to people whose entire job was to avoid scandal. Within days, Wren was suddenly taking a leave to focus on family. Within a week, the church fundraiser was under review. And once the word review hits a woman like Wren, everyone who used to laugh too loudly at her jokes starts finding reasons to be busy. Callie tried to regain control the only way she knew how, flooding the air with her version of reality. She sent emails to my work account after I blocked her number, long paragraphs that swung from rage to tenderness, like she thought I could be yanked back into place with the right tone. She called Naomi, "your little attack dog." She called me cold. She called what she'd done complicated. She never called it wrong. When she realized she couldn't reach me, she sent Dale to call, sweet, uncomfortable Dale, who sounded like a man standing in the doorway of a burning kitchen asking if anyone needed a glass of water. "Son?" he said softly, and I could hear Wren moving in the background like a storm. "I don't know what happened, but Wren says you're escalating things." I almost laughed. Escalating. As if I'd started the fire. "Dale," I said, keeping my voice even, "I'm not escalating. I'm responding. There's a difference." He went quiet for a moment, then sighed like the truth had weight. "Yeah," he said, "I'm starting to see that." A month later, Jay texted me one sentence that explained why Dale's voice had sounded so tired. Dale had moved out. No announcement, no dramatic Facebook post, just a man quietly removing himself from the blast radius of a woman who believed consequences were something you could talk your way around. And somewhere in the middle of all that, between legal filings, bank statements, and whispered resignations, I realized something that should have broken me, but didn't. Callie hadn't just chosen Damon over me. She'd chosen a life where lying was normal, where truth was flexible, and where the only loyalty that mattered was to herself. Once I saw that clearly, the marriage didn't feel like it was ending. It felt like it had already ended a long time ago, and I was just finally reading the last page. 3 months after Labor Day, I saw Callie under fluorescent lights in a grocery store, like the universe had a sense of humor. It wasn't some dramatic, rain-soaked confrontation outside a courthouse. It was aisle 7, near the bread, with a kid somewhere crying about cereal and the air smelling faintly like baked sugar. I was reaching for coffee filters when I felt it, someone looking at me with that particular intensity that makes your shoulders tighten before your brain catches up. "Ethan," she said, and the sound of my name in her mouth hit me like a memory I didn't ask for. I turned slowly, and there she was, pushing a cart with 2 limp bags of produce, her hair pulled back like she hadn't had the energy to make it pretty. She looked thinner, not in a glamorous way, in the way people look when sleep has been rationed. For a second, my mind tried to offer me the old version of her. The woman who used to sing in the kitchen while she cooked. The woman who cried at dog videos and kissed my cheek in elevators. But then I saw the tension around her mouth, the careful way her eyes darted like she was measuring whether I was safe or dangerous, and I remembered what she tried to build about me. Unpredictable. Anger issues. A story designed to scare me into handing over my life. "I didn't think you'd actually do it," she blurted, like the betrayal itself had been a kind of dare and I'd finally taken it. That sentence told me everything. Not "I'm sorry," not "I was wrong," just shocked that I had refused my assigned role. "I did." I said, my voice calm enough to surprise me. Her eyes filled fast, and she stepped closer as if tears were a bridge she could still use. Damon won't even talk to me, she said, words tumbling out. He's in trouble, Ethan. Everything is falling apart. The lawyers, the investigation. I didn't know it would get this bad. I watched her say it, and the strangest thing happened. Nothing happened inside me. No heat in my chest. No urge to rescue her. No satisfaction either. Just a quiet, hollow stillness where love used to live. It wasn't that I'd forgiven her. It was that I'd moved past the point where her emotions had authority over my nervous system. That's your life, I said softly. Not mine. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Then she tried one more hook, the last card she had left. Do you want to know about the baby? Her hand drifted toward her stomach on instinct, a gesture meant to make me remember vows and softness and the old future we'd once imagined. I didn't flinch. I didn't lean in. I didn't ask questions. I want you to talk to your lawyer, I said, and your doctor, and your mother. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, to cry louder, to force me into the conversation she needed. But I was already backing away, already turning my cart toward the checkout like she was just another stranger in a store. And as I walked, I realized the final piece of the ending wasn't the filings or the freeze on accounts or the whispers that toppled Ren's reputation. The ending was this. I could hear Callie's voice calling my name and still keep walking. I didn't feel like I was winning. I felt like I was free. After the grocery store, the noise finally started to fade. Not the legal noise. Naomi still sent updates in clean, unemotional emails, and Jay still flagged anything that looked like a last-minute grab. But the inner noise, the constant replaying of words through that ripped screen door, the imaginary arguments I could have had if I'd been a different kind of man. The divorce moved the way divorces move when one person stops negotiating and starts documenting. Slow on the calendar, fast in the heart. Callie's side tried to posture at first, suggesting I'd overreacted, hinting at mediation, floating little claims that evaporated the moment Naomi asked for proof. Every time they reached for the anger issues story, Naomi met it with timestamps, records, and the simple fact that I hadn't broken a thing, threatened anyone, or sent a single message that could be twisted. In the end, there was nothing to sell. You can't convince a judge a man is unstable when all he's done is file paperwork and stay quiet. Damon's situation rolled on in the background like thunder. You don't see yet, but you feel in your teeth. I never got the full story, and honestly, I stopped trying to. What I did know came in fragments from Serena. Search warrants, subpoenas, meetings with attorneys that ran too long, the kind of stress that turns a person's voice into something dry and exhausted. She filed for divorce without drama, just the same way she did everything else. Clean cuts, clean facts, clean exits. One afternoon, she texted me asking if I wanted to meet for coffee in Atlanta, just to close the loop. I almost said no because I was tired of loops, tired of other people's messes. But something in me understood she wasn't asking for comfort. She was asking for the small decency of being seen by someone who knew what it cost. We met at a quiet cafe downtown where nobody cared who we were. Serena looked different in person than she did online. Less polished, more real, like she'd finally stopped performing for an audience that didn't deserve her. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We talked like two people comparing weather after the same storm. What we lost, what we protected, what we wished we'd noticed sooner. Before she left, she paused with her hand on the door and said, "You did the right thing calling me." I nodded. "You did the right thing believing me." She gave me a small smile, tired, genuine. "Most people don't," she said, and then she was gone. A week later, on a plain Tuesday morning, I woke up alone in my house and realized I could breathe without bracing for impact. The sun came through the kitchen window in a clean rectangle. The world didn't feel exciting. It didn't feel romantic. It felt quiet. I made coffee, stood barefoot on my own floor, and understood the real ending wasn't Damon's downfall or Ren's whispers or Callie's tears in aisle 7. The ending was that I could live in my own life again without asking anyone's permission. Not happy, not yet, but steady. And for the first time in a long time, steady felt like something worth building on. A funny thing happened once the papers were signed and the last account was separated. People started telling me I was strong. Like strength was something you prove in a single dramatic scene. Like I'd stood in a doorway and delivered a monologue and everyone clapped. The truth was uglier and quieter. Strength looked like deleting messages without reading them. It looked like letting my phone buzz and choosing not to chase closure from a person who had already chosen damage. It looked like waking up at 3:12 a.m. with my mind trying to negotiate with a past that was already dead, then rolling over and forcing myself to breathe until the panic loosened its grip. Nobody applauds that. Nobody sees it. But that's the part that matters. For a while, my life felt stripped down to the basics: work, gym, grocery runs that didn't end in emotional landmines, a house that was suddenly too quiet, like the rooms were waiting for arguments that would never come. I stopped driving toward Savannah on weekends. I stopped taking calls from unknown numbers. I stopped explaining the story to people who wanted the dramatic version, the one where I was either the hero or the fool. Some days I felt clean. Other days I felt like a man walking around with invisible bruises. I learned that healing isn't a straight line. It's a loop with better boundaries each time you pass the same pain. One night, months later, I found the bag of pralines in the back of my pantry. I must have tossed it there without thinking, a souvenir from the moment my life split. The box was stale, the sugar hardened like stone. I stood there holding it and felt something in my throat tighten. Not grief for Callie, not longing for the marriage, but grief for the version of myself who believed love meant you could relax. The version of me who thought showing up early with a gift was enough to keep a family intact. I threw the box away, took out the trash, and when I came back inside, I locked the door like I was finally choosing my own side. A few days after that, Serena sent me a message, a simple update, no emotion attached. He was officially charged, it read. That was it. No celebration, no revenge, just a fact, another door closing. I stared at the screen and realized I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt done. Like the story had finally reached the part where it stopped owning space in my head. That's what people don't understand about endings. They think endings come with fireworks or forgiveness or a new romance wrapped in a neat bow. Sometimes the ending is quieter. Sometimes the ending is you standing at your kitchen sink, watching water run over your hands, realizing you haven't thought about her voice through that screen door in 2 full days. Sometimes the ending is you noticing you're smiling at nothing, just because the air in your house feels safe. I didn't rebuild my life in one bold move. I rebuilt it in hundreds of small choices that all said the same thing: I'm not available for betrayal anymore. And that, more than anything, felt like freedom. A year later, the calendar tried to hand me the same weekend again. Labor Day banners showed up in store windows, and coworkers started talking about lake trips and cookouts like nothing bad had ever happened to anyone in late summer. I felt the old reflex, my body bracing for the screen door, for Callie's laugh, for the way my name sounded when it wasn't said with love. But the reflex didn't own me anymore. It was just a shadow crossing the floor, and I could watch it pass without chasing it. That Friday, I took the day off and drove out to the water alone. Not Savannah, not to prove a point, just to put distance between who I was and who I'd become. I parked near a quiet stretch where the tide moved slow and steady, and I walked until my thoughts stopped running ahead of me like they needed to win a race. The wind off the coast had a way of stripping everything down. No courtroom language, no family politics, no "what did I do wrong?" spinning in circles. Just salt air and the simple fact that I was still here, still intact, still capable of choosing. My phone buzzed once while I was standing there, staring at the horizon. A message from an unknown number. For half a second, my stomach tightened the way it used to. Then I did what the old me never would have done. I didn't open it. I blocked it. I put the phone back in my pocket and let the silence stay clean. That was the new muscle I'd built. Quiet boundaries. Not out of bitterness, but out of respect for my own nervous system. On the drive back to Atlanta, I stopped at a hardware store and bought paint. Nothing dramatic. Just a few gallons in a warm, neutral color. That weekend, I painted the guest room. The room that had held Callie's extra clothes, her half-finished projects, her later piles. I took everything out, cleaned the baseboards, rolled fresh color onto the walls until the room stopped feeling like a museum of a life that didn't exist. When I finished, I stood in the doorway with paint on my hands and realized I wasn't erasing her. I was reclaiming space. That night, I cooked for myself. Simple food, nothing performative, and ate at the table instead of on the couch. I opened the windows. I let the house breathe. And for the first time since that weekend, I caught myself thinking about the future without flinching. Not a fantasy future, just a normal one. More mornings like this, more rooms that felt like mine. Maybe someday, someone I could trust, but only if trust made sense, not because I was lonely enough to force it. People ask what the lesson was, like life hands out neat morals. I don't have a slogan. I just know this. Betrayal taught me what it costs to ignore red flags. Recovery taught me what it means to choose myself without apologizing. And standing there in my quiet house, with fresh paint drying and the air moving through open windows, I understood the real ending wasn't revenge. It was peace that didn't need anyone else's permission. A couple of weeks after I painted the guest room, I caught myself doing something I hadn't done in a long time, making plans without checking whether someone else would approve of them. It started small. Saturday mornings at the same diner, a run at Piedmont Park, a book I picked because I wanted it, not because it looked good on a coffee table. But the real shift came the night my friend Marcus invited me to a rooftop cookout. Old Ethan would have made an excuse, told himself he wasn't ready, stayed home with the comfort of silence. This time, I showed up with a six-pack and no story prepared. I didn't want to be the guy with the tragedy. I wanted to be a normal person again, standing under string lights pretending the world didn't break people. Of course, someone asked. They always do. So, how have you been? It was the tone that gave it away. Careful, sympathetic, hungry for details. I felt the familiar urge to either spill everything or shut down completely. Instead, I took a sip of my drink and said, better. Not defensive, not dramatic, just true. The conversation moved on. And that's when I realized something that felt like a quiet miracle. My past didn't have to be the most interesting thing about me anymore. Later, while I was leaning against the railing watching cars move like slow fireflies below, a woman I didn't know stepped beside me and offered a paper plate with a slightly burnt burger. "You look like you're thinking too hard," she said. She was around my age, maybe late 30s, hair tied back, eyes that didn't flinch when they met mine. Her name was Lena. No reminder of Callie. No echo of that screen door. Just someone standing in the same humid night, making small talk like it was normal. We talked about harmless things at first. Atlanta traffic, bad cooking, the fact that everybody pretends they like rooftop parties more than they actually do. Then she said casually, "I'm freshly divorced, so I'm practicing being around people again." There was no tremble in her voice, no performance, just honesty. I didn't tell her my whole story. I didn't need to. I just nodded and said same. That was enough. We didn't bond over rage. We didn't swap scars like trading cards. We just stood there and let the city breathe around us. Before she left, she said, "If you ever want to grab coffee, no pressure. Here's my number." She held her phone out like an option, not a demand. I typed it in, and what surprised me wasn't hope. It was calm. No fireworks, no fear. Just the simple sense that I still had choice. When I got home, I set my keys on the counter and looked around my quiet house, the fresh paint, the open windows, the absence of dread, and it hit me. This was the part I'd never pictured during the worst nights. Not a dramatic revenge scene, not a perfect new romance, just a life that felt like mine, with room in it for something good if, and only if, it arrived gently. 2 days later, I stared at Lena's number like it was a test I hadn't studied for. Not because I didn't want to call, because I did, but because I'd spent so long teaching myself that wanting something could be dangerous. Wanting Kali to love me had made me ignore what my gut knew. Wanting the marriage to work had made me swallow small humiliations until they became normal. So I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee cooling, listening to the house breathe around me, and I asked myself a question I'd never asked when I was married. Does this feel safe or does it feel familiar? The answer was quiet but clear. Safe. Familiar doesn't ask your permission. Safe does. I texted her one sentence. "Hey, it's Ethan. Coffee this week?" My thumb hovered for half a second before I hit send, like I was stepping off a curb into traffic. Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Thursday works. There's a place on Highland that's calm. 4? No heart emojis, no forced enthusiasm, just a plan that respected time, space, and the fact that adults are tired. Thursday afternoon, I walked into the cafe and saw her at a corner table with a book open and her phone face down. That detail mattered more than it should have. Face down meant she wasn't waiting for someone else's attention to validate her. She looked up, smiled, and closed the book like she was choosing the moment, not multitasking through it. We talked for an hour. Nothing dramatic, no deep confessions, just the steady exchange of real things. Work stress, family weirdness, the strange aftertaste of divorce, how quiet can be peaceful and also a little cruel. At one point, she said, "I'm not in a rush to be anything to anyone." Then she glanced at me and added, "But I like talking to you." It didn't feel like a hook. It felt like consent. When we left, we stood outside in the late-day heat while traffic sighed past us. She didn't reach for my hand. I didn't reach for hers. We just stood there, and somehow that restraint felt more intimate than any grand gesture. Before she got into her car, she said, "Same time next week?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said, "I'd like that." Driving home, I caught myself doing something I hadn't done in a year, imagining a future without bracing for the trapdoor. Not a fantasy with perfect love and erased pain, just a future with small, honest days. The kind where trust isn't demanded. It's earned, slowly, with behavior that matches words. That night, I opened the windows and let the air move through the house. I thought about loyalty, how I used to define it as endurance, as staying, as taking whatever was handed to me and calling it commitment. Now I understood something simpler. Loyalty isn't what you tolerate. It's what you protect. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't protecting a marriage that didn't protect me. I was protecting my peace. And it felt like coming home. Ethan Park thought he was surprising his wife for Labor Day weekend until an overheard conversation behind a ripped screen door shattered everything. In less than a minute, he learns Callie is pregnant with her boss's baby, and her family is already planning the divorce, the money grab, and a story to paint him as unstable. Instead of exploding, Ethan goes quiet, gets smart, and fights the only way that matters, legally, strategically, and clean. This is a first-person story about betrayal, receipts, and the kind of revenge that ends in peace.